Hi, Bridget. Thanks so much for joining us today to chat about open access. We're really pleased to have you here and to hear a bit more about your experience. Published your book, Ethnicity, Race and Inequality in the UK, State of the Nation, with us. And you and I first talked about it in 2018, so quite a while ago now. Things were obviously quite different then in terms of open access, definitely fewer open access books available, less funding, though obviously there's still a bit of an issue with that, but things have changed quite significantly. But we're really interested to hear from you today a bit about your experience with the book. So maybe to start off, could you tell us a bit about the journey from conception through to publication, just to give us an overview? Thanks.
Yes, so I am and was the director of the Centre on Dynamics of Ethnicity Code at the University of Manchester, and we were coming towards the end of a tranche of ESRC funding as a research centre, and we'd worked very closely through that period with the Runnymede Trust, so we were discussing with them about um, producing a document that would, or a publication that would be useful for people in terms of summing up where we were in the state of race, ethnicity, and inequality in the UK. And in some ways, it was a slight return or a thinking about the earlier Runnymede Trust document that had been done 20 years ago. And because we were a group involved in the centre, we mostly drew on expertise within the group, but also brought in people from outside with particular expertise to write very accessible chapters summing up the state of race inequalities in education, housing, with the police, cultural representation, and all these different areas. So that was the concept. The concept was a kind of edited book which delivered. There's now a lot of data available. We know where the inequalities are, but delivers the data in a useful, accessible way, but also importantly explains how you need to, because there's a kind of how you need to interpret that data, because there can be a problem in people thinking the figures speak for themselves, but actually they don't. They always need contextualization. And so to do that contextualization also in an accessible way. So that was the core idea, if you like, for the project. Um,
And I wondered if you could tell us a bit about how the decision to make it open access maybe influenced that development a bit from that stage.
yeah, so for us, I'm not sure we would have published it if we didn't do it open access. So it's very important to us that it was freely accessible because we wanted to reach beyond academia and students. So academics and students can download books nowadays relatively easily, as well as students. But we wanted to step beyond that audience. And so we felt that it was really important that it should be free, literally freely available, and that the graphs and the chapters, but also the graphs should be downloadable and copyable for people to use in a whole range of different ways. So the open aspect of it for us was really critical. As I said, I guess we might have considered if it could have been really cheap, but it was obviously even better for us that it was completely freely available. And in terms of funding, at the time we were lucky because we had a big centre, we were able to find the money. It wasn't money that we had costed before, because at the beginning of the project, I guess we hadn't thought about doing it. And it is now it's something that I would think about more about costing it into the original project. But we were able to out of other dissemination budgets, we were able to find the money to do it, which was great.
Yeah, I definitely think it's now become more in people's mindset to think about it earlier on. But as you say, then it was kind of, I remember talking about it with you, and it was kind of, oh, we need to cost for open access. We didn't have our set fees yet then in terms of what a BPC would be. When still much earlier and everyone's thinking about it. But certainly BP and Policy Press, we've been just delighted to see the book consistently in our top 5 in terms of usage. So that's obviously brilliant across the different open access platforms where it's available, including our own Bristol University Press digital. I wonder if you could tell us a bit about how, from your perspective, open access has contributed to the book's wider dissemination and impact as well, and share any examples you might have.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's really great to hear that it's been so successful and that it's consistently drawn upon, because I mean, there's a new census that's come out, but I think a lot of the data is not from the census, so it still, I think, has a great deal of relevance. And it initially came out, of course, in 2020 when we'd gone into lockdown, and there were the issues around racial inequalities suddenly became, a higher priority on lots of people's minds with the murder of George Floyd in the US and the Black Lives Matter movement. So I was very conscious that it was a resource that people were using at that moment. But the fact that one worries in our field, we worry that these issues then kind of slide off people's attention. So the fact that it's still being accessed and used is really great for us. I mean, in those periods, I was very aware that people were using it in different ways. So we got, for example, I got emails from GPs who downloaded it because they were trying to think through some of the issues around access to health and race inequalities. And I'm sure it's been used a lot for teaching and as a kind of reference book. It gets referred to in sort of government reports occasionally. I pick up those kind of references, and it's very widely cited. But for us, I think beyond the citation, we're really enthusiastic about the fact that it's being used in a whole range of different ways, and probably in schools and other places where people are trying to think about the nature of inequalities and how they might be addressing them in different institutional contexts, for example. And that's very important to us. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we talked about how you have put quite a lot of work into that presentation of that data, and I think that's the kind of thing where I think it does really make it especially useful in those different contexts. And it's great for us to be able to point to that when we're also marketing the book and sharing information about it with people, and being able to link directly to chapters and show the kind of data, I think is probably really helpful. So another question about related to the theme of Open Access Week around community over commercialization. I just wondered if you could say a bit about how you think your book exemplifies the importance of open scholarly communication and collaboration.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as I said, the whole point of the book was to reach beyond academia, which is not quite commercialization, but it's both community over commercialization, but also community over academic credentials, if you like, or not credentials, but academic success. So it was not about getting the citations. It was about making this information. And, I hope what we achieved to do was really present some quite complex ideas, to put the data that needs that explanation in a very accessible way that's useful to a whole range of people. And that was the whole motivation for the report, as well as to suggest certain recommendations that institutions, including the state, but others, need to think about when thinking about these issues. So it was, I think it really does sum that up in that it was directed towards the community or a community audience, and that for us was the most important thing. And the fact that it continues to be used, beyond we've paid you the fees, but it's continues to be available, which in a way doesn't serve you commercially, is great for us. We really appreciate that.
Yeah,
I should say we also did. This, it's part of the Times. We did buy some hard copy of the book, which it's a nice object to have. So we bought some, and we were planning to go to give conferences and give them out at conferences and other events, but COVID intervened. So we had to think of other ways to to spread them. So we gave them to school libraries. We put out, we got rid of, at some point it felt like we had to get rid of them. They had to leave the office. It took a long time to physically get them because of lockdown, and then we wanted to get them out and being read. And there was a big take up of that. But behind that is still the fact that people can go on the open access and download the graphs and, distribute the chapters that are of interest to them in particular ways. So we worked also to think about how to target those different audiences for the books in different ways. And sometimes there's a particular pleasure in a physical book that can't be overcome. But the fact that behind it is an open access digital version also is really useful, I think.
Yes, definitely. We do still find some people are keen to have the print version, and it's nice to have the option. And I think that's one of the things that we try to do with our open access books, make sure that people do still feel that the book is being produced in a way that means everyone can access it in those different versions, and also, market it and disseminate it as we would any of our other books, to make sure that it reaches as many people as possible.
Yeah.
So just one final question then. I was just thinking it might be helpful if you could tell us, looking back, what advice you would maybe give other researchers considering open access, and maybe just some, key messages in terms of what you think about the benefits.
Yeah, so I think thinking about funding is obviously important. And as you say, that there's now more institutional funding if you're lucky enough to be in an institution that provides that. And if you're seeking funding for your research, it's one thing to think about to cost open access in. I think that if it's because you're going to get a different audience than an academic audience, it's really good to think about the audience as you write it and how you want it to be used and how it's going to appear digitally and be used digitally. So to think about some of the advantages of that and make sure that you're maximizing them. And yeah, I think that's the main thing. And then think about how you then you do your marketing, but also we try and distribute links to the open access through social media and other ways to kind of spread, because you want it to be spread as wide as possible. And so that's, yeah, so think about dissemination as well from the perspective of authors as not just the publisher. Yeah.
Yes, that's actually a great note to end on, because I do think that the best books, whether or not they are able to get open access funding or not, actually are ones where there is that partnership. I think it does work really well for the publisher and author team to think about the different ways they can reach out and work together on that. And we definitely enjoy working with people when we can kind of collaborate in that way and do what we can to support them with what they're doing. So it's been really great to work with you on it, and long may it continue to be in the top used open access books.
Definitely, yes.
Thank you very much.